Hello, my name is Oscar Fire, and it's kind of late actually. It's actually past 11 o'clock right now in the evening, and yeah, but I just finished reading The Voyage of the Gerald Shannara, Antrax, and I want to talk about it while it's still fresh in my mind. So that's what we are going to do. So I will tell you right now, this is easily one of the best books in the saga. Easily. It is just such a compelling narrative. It's a narrative that keeps moving and never bogs down. It always keeps moving forward. Narratively, there's no issues with this book almost whatsoever. Like I'll tell you right now, like I'm about to, like, because of course I have my things to say about it, but I don't have as many as I normally do. Remember how much I actually kind of criticized Heritage for some of its oversights and lack of thinking more deeply on issues. But here I almost think this is easily one of the best books he actually has ever written in the entire saga. I think I still personally prefer like Elf Stones and Elf Queen, and I'm pretty sure I still prefer Genesis as a whole to this one. But this is still, it's from a narrative perspective, this is actually one of the best books he's written. Having said that, I'm actually just going to get my major complaint about this book out of the way. And the funny thing is that my major complaint about this book is not even like a literary or narrative thing. It's actually more of a personal taste thing. And that is, this book has way too high of a casualty count. Way too many people, way too many members of the expedition die in this book. And I really wish Terry Brooks had not done that. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that it works. From a storytelling perspective, I think it actually works very well, because it really drives home the fact that Antrax is a threat, and Antrax is an incredibly dangerous threat that needs to be taken seriously. But I personally think that Terry Brooks could have driven that point home without making the shore party suffer like a 70% casualty rate, where almost everyone is dead. I was parsing this out in my head / out loud earlier. I was thinking about it in terms of like a military, because there is like a world of difference between an army that achieves an objective when it loses by losing 50% of its people, and achieves an objective of losing 70% of its people. Even though the numbers are both very big, the gulf between them is incredibly vast. And part of it is that simply the cost versus the benefit is just, is what you consider, and it's much easier to kind of swallow the cost the lower that number is, right? Even if both numbers are big. And the way I see it is in this case, it's sort of like the difference between, say, an army that loses 50% of its men, but its general's still alive and its regiments are still largely intact, still capable fighting forces, versus an army that lost 70% of its men and its regiments are shattered and its general is dead, which is basically what happens to the expedition of the Gerald Shannara. Because at the end of Antrax, of course, Walker is dying, and most of them are dead except for the Rovers. The Rovers are the only contingent that actually still have their numbers. As far as I'm aware, the only ones confirmed killed is Furl Hawken. And I feel like that is kind of unnecessary. I feel like causing that much pain and death and destruction is not really totally necessary. It's fine to do the high casualty thing, but I think that sometimes, and I think this is a trap that a lot of authors tend to kind of sort of fall into, especially when their legacy, especially in the case of fantasy, where legacy is the Lord of the Rings, they're trying to create a darker version of their progenitor stories. Which, by the way, the Lord of the Rings, and more precisely the apocryphal stuff like this, Silmarillion and everything, are actually very, very dark. But leaving that aside, I feel like a lot of authors have a tendency to like kind of overcompensate and turn, and try to make something dark for darkness' sake. And I don't think that's necessary. I don't think it was necessary here either. It's fine that like all these, it's fine that all these casualties happened, but I would have liked personally, at least, a counterpoint. And I cite specifically Quentin's group because, of course, Quentin Leah, along with Panix the dwarf, Tamis the tracker, and the elves Kyan and Y. I don't know how you pronounce them. It's normal Terry Brooks. I just put a bunch of random letters together to make elf names, and they don't sound like elf names by any stretch of the imagination, but we're going to pretend they sound like elf names. And not just like, and don't just sound like, like a bit of, alphabetical diarrhea. But, I would have liked it if that group had survived more intact. But instead, by the end of the book, both Kyan and Y are dead, and Panix is missing. I'm pretty sure he's still alive, if I recall correctly. I'm pretty sure he's still alive. And Tamis is killed by the Ard Patronel Rank. And it's just... And so Quentin's left all alone, with the corpse of the one person who he's been able to work with this entire time. And that wasn't necessary. And there's all these hints that, and like there's all these hints too where it's like at the very beginning, when they return to the ruins with the contingent of Ringe, the natives, the Ringe, and they encounter the Ronk for the first time, they actually hold their own. They actually all survive that initial encounter. And I feel like a little bit of... I feel like there's plenty of reason and rationale to making it so that, like at least most of them survive. You can kill one of them, but not most of them. I think that's too dark. I think that's way too dark, in fact. I think that like there's given the darkness that Iron Alesidil, Ryrord Star, Beck Omsford, given all that they're going through, Walker as well, given everything they're going through, it would have been nice to have this, this third leg go through something positive. And now you might say that, the Rovers retaking command of the Gerald Shannara and saving it from being crushed in the Squirm and everything, you might say that was, that's your hope point, right? But I would argue that the Shore Party needed something uplifting as well, and I think that's where you get it from. But that being said, that is my only major complaint about this story. And again, it's mostly a personal preference sort of thing. Otherwise, the book is absolutely brilliant. The book is splendid and enjoyable and a good read. It's very heavy at times, but I think because the pace is so strong, it never bogs down, and you never get stuck in the dark moments, even though there's lots of dark moments and sometimes strings of dark moments, lots of dark moments strung together, albeit in like a sort of a cadence, an up and down cadence. It's not like, it's like you never get stuck on one dark moment because there's such a large cast in the story that you are always jumping from perspective to perspective. One chapter, for a couple chapters you're with Quentin, then for one chapter you're with Beck, and then for another chapter you're with Aaron Alesidil and Ryrord Star, and then another one, it just you're with Rue Meridian, and then another one you're with the Osa Witch. There's so many different perspectives, and they're interwoven absolutely beautifully in this story. Like it's I cannot praise that. I cannot praise that element enough. You know, and it's like everyone kind of gets a moment to shine or to be a distinct character or to be a unique character or to be an interesting character. And I think that's really neat. Gosh, that is the dumbest way I could have phrased that, isn't it? Did my desktop just... Did I just hear Facebook? I totally did. Thanks. I'm just gonna close that Facebook tab before that happens again. Anyway, but yeah, no, it's very brilliantly, very brilliantly written, and I just, I mean, and listen, I mean, the thing about it is that because each of the characters gets like a moment, I feel for them. I feel for each of them. You know, I think it's, I had a realization earlier where I'm like, so Panics, of course, has his moment where, you know, he can speak to the Ringe because the Ringe are apparently speaking an archaic form of dwarf. Now, of course, if you know anything about the history of Shannara, we all know that the Four Lands are roughly located in the northwestern United States, southwestern Canada. And the journey takes them across the ocean to up to a continent on the other side of the sea, on a peninsula, which almost guarantees that it's probably, given how far north it is probably the Kamchatka Peninsula in Russia, which actually very heavily implies that Dwarfish is actually some sort of latter-day version of Russian. And I just thought, I had that kind of realization of like, wait a minute. Because odds are, you know, that the people of Shannara, the world of Shannara, are speaking variations of our modern-day languages. Obviously heavily altered, heavily changed and everything. But odds are the people in the Four Lands are speaking some form of English, you know? And it probably sounds nothing like English, you know? It's probably as removed from modern-day English as Old English is removed from modern-day English. But, you know, I just thought that was a kind of a funny thing. But yeah, you know, but like characters like Panic, they get their moment. And of course, Tamis, of course, was in love with Ard Patronel, who was, of course, turned into a horrific cyborg by Antrax, called a Runk, as I've already mentioned. You know, and her heartbreak is palpable, and it kind of turns her into almost a berserker who ends up getting herself killed trying to, you know, end Ard Patronel's suffering. You know, and of course Quentin, who, despite having the magic of the Sword of Leah, which is a powerful magic, is... Okay, you know what? I actually just thought of something else that actually kind of bothers me about this book. But this actually goes back to Ilsa Witch as well, but I will get back to that in a second. But of course, you know, Quentin Leah feeling kind of not super useful because even though he is very capable of fighting the Ronk, he is nonetheless, you know, the power isn't enough, you know, like they have to put everything into this fight, and it still costs that one of them their lives, and it costs the entire Ringe village their lives. It, you know, and most of their team their lives, and it's just, you know, like it has an impact. And by the way, this is what bothers me, is the fact that so we know the Sword of Leah and the Elf Stones are designed to combat magic. But kind of like I talked about how the history of the Elcris is changed by Terry Brooks in the last book, we also see here the Sword of Leah and the Elf Stones responding to the responding to the technology of Antrax. And I understand why Terry Brooks did it, because otherwise all these magical talismans would be totally useless. But he does completely change the way these things work. Just like the Sword of Shannara in the last book, he completely changes the way these talismans work, just so that they will be functional and useful in the situation they are in. And it's kind of a cheap cop-out way to handle it. You know, I mean, it's okay, but it's also kind of, no, you shouldn't do that. You should have just changed the rules arbitrarily like that. You know, but I mean, it's not like Terry Brooks goes around doing it all the time. So I kind of forgive him for changing the way the talismans work so that, you know, so that people can actually fight effectively. It's just kind of, You know what else would have worked? Just making it so that the machines weren't so sturdy that their swords were completely useless. You know, I mean, you could also do that, you know, I mean, it's not exactly like Antrax is living in a time where, you know, it's possible to mine heavy metals out of the earth anymore, or, you know, smelt advanced metals, engage in advanced metallurgy anymore. You know, I think it's entirely feasible to believe that Antrax would build robots out of inferior quality materials because it has no choice. But maybe that's just me. Anyway, but yeah, and then you get to like Raya Ord-Star and her dependence on Walker and the revelation that she is, of course, the spy for the Ilsa Witch. You know, I think, honestly, I felt the most, I think, for Raya. The way, you know, the way she's trying to atone for the fact that she's basically betrayed the entire expedition to, you know, to their enemy. You know, I really feel that. And the way, you know, she like clings to Walker and wants to help him and wants to try and save him. And, you know, at the end, she actually can't because he's too badly hurt to actually help. You know? And I also realized earlier, it's like, wait, Walker appears very, very little in this book, and yet he makes such an impact. I'm not gonna lie, I feel very disappointed that Terry Brooks decided that Walker was gonna die on the expedition. You know, I felt very disappointed by that because it's like, you know, he spent all these years trying to rebuild the Druid Order, and he ultimately just ends up dying, and it's just, ultimately ends up dying before he can actually fulfill his own mission, and it's just like, you know, you could throw, the man's already lost an arm and has betrayed basically all of his ethics and principles. You could at least throw him a bone and let him succeed at something, but no, the only thing he ever succeeds at doing is blowing up the Shadow and blowing up Antrax. It's like, okay. But you know, it's again, it's very good. It's very well written. And then of course there's Aaron Alesidil, you know, who I found myself kind of relating to on some level, relating to like his feelings of insecurity and the idea that, you know, his brother basically sent him on this expedition to die, and, you know, he's not very useful, and he finds himself, you know, he considers himself a coward for throwing down his weapon and running during the end of the last book, you know, and just leaving Ard Patronel to be turned into a horrific monstrosity, and he doesn't even know that Ard Patronel was turned into a horrific monstrosity at this point in the story, you know, and he has to find a way to redeem himself, and he does that by protecting Ryer and using the Phoenix Stone and recovering the Elf Stones, you know, and it's like, yeah, I kind of sort of vaguely, it's not a one-to-one comparison, but I don't know, I kind of vaguely just relate to that on some level, of the feeling of like kind of being a failure, I guess. I know it's kind of personal to say that, but it's just, it feels, it's a familiar feeling, and I understand it. But, you know, this sort of, his ability to redeem himself in his own eyes, and probably in the eyes of his people too, is a very strong moment for the book, and I have to give it that. I also like the interactions between Beck Omsford and Truls Roke. I really think that's really, really cool. I think, you know, the idea that, you know, Truls doesn't, you know, sees himself as hideous and a monster, partially because he kind of is, but, you know, it's not what he is on the outside that matters, it's what he is on the inside. You know, it's a perfectly great message, honest to goodness, and it's not forced in your face. It's done perfectly well. It's not clumsy or ham-fisted. It's done perfectly well. It's a perfectly executed story, you know. And of course, talking about Beck, though, one of the clumsiest parts of the book is Beck trying to convince the Ilsa Witch of the truth of things. And the way I'm just reminded, and it's a very clumsily written part of the book, because the way it's written, Beck isn't arguing like a natural human being. In some ways it kind of is, But the way he's arguing is kind of like how I would like write like a serious opinion. It feels too nuanced, and it feels not nuanced, but it feels too. It's written too clinically. Like the words that are chosen are too perfect. It's like, this is not how two people who are being emotional and are frustrated are going to talk about serious emotional things with each other. And that bothers me, because it's like the end result is that Beck basically comes across basically as like a freshman college student who only knows how to argue on appeals of emotion, rather than trying to, maybe engage in a little emotionalism, but trying to actually logic out and present evidence and so on. Because the problem is that Beck really doesn't present any meaningful evidence to Grianne. He just kind of gets in her head regardless. And I just think that's hilarious and stupid, because it's just, this is not like a real person argument. It's kind of just a way to get from point A to point B, rhetorically speaking. And I think that's I just find it kind of annoying, because it's like, for a book where everything else is like really, really well written, like just there's a couple of moments, just like 2-3 chapters of that where Beck is talking to Grianne, and it's just like he doesn't come across as someone trying to persuade someone of the truth. He comes across as someone just appealing to emotion without trying to like concretely ground the argument effectively. And it's just kind of, I guess it's how real people would act, but it's also not, but it's not like written in a way that real people would like speak. That said, I kind of enjoy Beck's journey. I enjoy him trying to figure things out and trying to learn things and trying to make his own choices and make his own way in the world, Because that's a lot of what that is a lot of what he's doing. And of course he's being helped, and of course he's held captive for a time. But it's pretty well done. It's really well thought out and neat. And that leaves, of course, finally, well, no, it's not finally. I guess there's 2 more characters. But I don't have much to say about the Ilsa Witch in this book. I mean, she's just kind of there. We're just kind of keeping track of her progress. Getting into her head with regards to Beck and everything is fine, but it is what it is. And of course, finally, there is Rue Meridian and her journey to save the Jurl Shannara, and then eventually, with Hunter Pred, to capture the Black Moclips. Honest to goodness, I absolutely love the character of Rue Meridian. She's tough, she's strong, fiery redhead. What isn't there to love about her? What isn't there to love about her? I'll tell you right now. I could totally go for a wife like that. But we're not going to talk about that right now. But no, she's an absolutely splendid, interesting character, and she's a lot of fun. She's a lot of fun. She gets really badly hurt, and so she's so stubborn, yet she still goes out to try and figure out what happened to the shore party. And I just think I think she's cool. Okay, I think she's neat. Anyway, all right. But okay, I talked about this for a lot longer than I thought I would, but I actually could not praise this book more. It is so good. And if I recall correctly, I believe Morgara is, I think that's how you pronounce, I don't know how you pronounce that one. I believe, the third book of the series, I believe is almost just as good. But again, it's been 20 years since I read it, so, or probably, no, it's been shorter than 20 years. It came out 2004 or something, I think. Anyway, but yeah, no, I think the third book is just compelling, and I'm gonna get into that. I'm on vacation from work this week for the next 8 days or so. So I'm going to try and read that on vacation. As it stands, I burned through Antrax so much quicker than I thought it would. I thought it would take me another week to get through it, but I was burning like 45 pages a day on my lunch breaks at work, and it just, it was that engaging. So anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. This not even book review, it's more like a book ramble. If you enjoyed it, leave a like, leave a comment, share it around, do what you will. And I will catch you for my review of The Voyage of the Jurl Shannara Morgawer. 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 Until next time, everybody.